For you, those who weren't here yesterday, my name is Dee Dee Kamhai. I am the chair of the Social Action Team here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. And once a year, our Social Action Team has been putting on these programs on Mexican culture. And this year we decided very few people really know about the political structure of Mexico, so we have decided that this would be a really interesting topic. And of course, Carlos was here last year, and he knows everything about it, so he's introducing us. Bathrooms are in the back. Cell phones are off, yes, I hope. I think that is everything. I'd like to introduce you to Matt Alspa, who is the minister here at LCUUF, and he has a few comments for you. Here.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, I'm Matt, and I get always the interesting jobs. So my job this morning is to ask you if you might consider being generous to support this program. So this is the second year we've done this, and we've done it without any kind of registration fee, any kind of formal cost. It's based on donations, and donations really help the congregation decide whether we can keep doing things like this, because obviously there are some significant expenses to doing this. So outside, you knew about this yesterday, but many of you may be new to this, and each day there are donation baskets, and I invite you to, or jars or something, there's an obvious place to give money. So if you could obviously give money like I'm going to do now to support this, it allows us to do this once again next year. So thank you very much, and hope you enjoy this today and the rest of the week.
Gracias. Gracias. A couple of things. For people on Zoom, and I know that there are a lot, if you have any kind of comment, not just a question on how to use Zoom, but any kind of comment that you want to ask Carlos today, put it in the chat box, and Hyacinth outside is monitoring Zoom, and so she could tell us what the comment is. The other thing is we're going to have an evaluation on Friday. So think about, what you're thinking about this program. But if you can think of any other topic that you'd really like to know about Mexican culture, think about it and let us know. We are all ears. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce Carlos Navarro. And Carlos is going to tell you all about his little background, his big background. I'm just so impressed because he worked for the CIA in the United States. I think that's so cool. So, Carlos?
Thank you, Dee Dee. Those are the 5 words people get interested about. I worked for the CIA. Some of you love it. Some people should say, you should not say that out loud. You should keep it to yourself. But I think it does make sense because what I'm doing here with you and what I've done with expats in several cities in Mexico is pretty much what I used to do for the US government and then for the Mexican government. I indeed worked for the CIA, and then that was 22 years, and then in between those 22 years, I worked 5 years in the office of the President of Mexico. My boss was his chief of staff, so that was a lot of fun. And what I did there was pretty much what I learned in the CIA. So this is how things go. The Mexican government also wanted to know what Americans' crazy heads are thinking, and that was a little hard to do, but we gave it a shot for 5 years. That was really interesting. And again, what I call these Mexican conversations, I was saying yesterday, because this is exactly what I had with many US officials who were my customers. We worked for them. This could be the Texas sheriff or a cabinet member, sometimes the president. I won't go too much into details, but there were 2 occasions when I worked with the US government that I did get an email from Washington saying, and this was not common for them to do, but they did say, Carlos, what you did yesterday was really, really interesting. It worked, and today was on the president's desk. That's once with Bush and once with Obama. That was really, really interesting. What they did with it, we don't really know. But it was nice to know that they were reading this stuff. And again, it was cabinet members, usually principals, and all public officials, US public officials, down to the sheriff in Texas and the DEA in Arizona and all those beautiful people working for the US government. I started working in 2002. That's a good question because my job began or was designed because 9/11 happened the year before. So the US government decided that they didn't know very much about what the hell was going on around the world. So they hired me and a bunch of other people around the world. This was a part of the CIA called Open Source Center. So we looked at open source, which means media broadcast, television, newspapers, all of that, and we tried to filter that into English and into something American officials could understand. And at the Office of the President of Mexico, I worked from 2012, when he was elected, to 2016, when I moved to Puerto Vallarta. And then in Puerto Vallarta, again, I became a contractor again for the US government, so we can add a good 5 years there until someone arrived at the White House and decided that our contracts were useless and worthless, and here I am. You know, there's always a silver lining with the President of the United States because he did that and his administration has changed so many things. That's the reason I'm here giving you these lectures. So that's part of the explanation. So you have him to thank for me being here. Okay. Believe it or not. Okay, like Didi say, I was going to bring up the US Constitution. Someone was right out here. We had 7 articles, 27 amendments, and that made me think that this is why Americans usually speak of, oh, that's a violation of this and that amendment. Guys, reporters and people in the US speak more of amendments than of articles, of course, because, right, there's only 7, and there can only be amendments if you have articles. Here in Mexico, we have an article for everything. So you want to talk about labor unions, you quote Article 123. You want to talk about education, it's Article 3. You want to talk about freedom of expression and press freedoms, I mentioned those 2 a year ago, Articles 6 and 7. One regards freedom of expression, the other one, freedom of the press. So yes, thank you for that. I'm hoping this was a typo on my slide. That said 27 articles. I'm going to justify myself and excuse myself saying that. But yes, that's good. What I wanted you was to be able to compare the sizes and weights of each of the 2 books, the Mexican Constitution and the US Constitution. Okay, any questions from yesterday that you lost to sleep over or something like that? Okay. Today, like I said yesterday, because your main homework here on the Connect with Mexico lectures is talking to Mexicans, that would be unfair if you did know nothing about football, what you guys call soccer. So football is so important to Mexicans that I wanted to bring it up in the World Cup version of it this year, because I am trusting and hoping that you are the Mexico World Cup experts today. I love little quizzes on you, and I want to ask you things. So where was the inauguration of the World Cup? Who held the World Cup this year, 2026? Okay. Not every head of a state really liked that. Not every president and prime minister enjoyed that, but that's how it was. Where was it inaugurated? Was the inaugural ceremony of the World Cup? Mexico's Estadio Azteca, Mexico City. That was about June 11, right? Okay, so who was playing on that match? The inaugural had a ceremony, and then there was a match. So who played who? So there's one team that is really easy to...
Oh, I got it from him. He has the answer.
Oh, you're cheating.
I'm a parrot. I just parroted what I heard.
I know. He knows a lot. I do know that. So Mexico, all World Cups, the inaugural game is the host, right? So this was Mexico playing South Africa, right? See, I'm giving you a hard time with all this because when you sit in front of a Mexican on the bar, at the bar with a beer, and you do not know that we beat South Africa on June 11, 2026, this conversation is going nowhere, okay? So I am just giving you tips to have these conversations. I don't want for you to be in the wrong spot. So this is going to get even harder. How many matches did Mexico play in this World Cup? 4. You're doing great. South Africa, who else? Czechia. Is that, didn't we used to say the Czech Republic?
Yeah, now they call it Czechia.
Is Czechia the English version as well? Czechia, yes. Mexico, Czechia. Czechia is the Czech version. Because I always used, even in Spanish, La República Checa. Czech Republic. Yeah, I was a bit confused about that, to be honest. So who won that match? Who followed? Who did Mexico play with after that? Latin America. Latin America. Someone in Latin America attempted to face Mexico in Mexico. No? I heard someone lived there for a few years in the middle of South America. Ecuador. Ecuador. And Mexico won, of course. The background story there is that Ecuador presented, you probably know this, if you're not, this is great conversation with Mexicans. The Ecuadorian team presented a complaint before the FIFA. Did you hear that? Because the Mexican fans sent out the mariachis all night to play in front of the hotel where they were hosted. So this was so against the rules, you know. These poor guys could sleep all night because the mariachis were there celebrating Mexico and Ecuador, I have to say, right out their window. So FIFA thought that was not breaking the rules. It was just Mexican culture, and that was it. But there was a complaint about that. And then we had the final game, Mexico, England in Mexico City as well, which, of course, we lost. Why did we lose that match with England? Why did we lose? You know, these guys invented the game, these English people. You know, they came up with a game, so of course they would win. You know, it's interesting, England and all those parties, because my dad, I have to confess I am no football fan. I'm just giving you a hard time here. But my dad was such a big fan. You know, he used his spreadsheet, his Excel spreadsheet to have the goals and before they would even be shown on the TV that evening, that Sunday evening, because he would watch the summaries of all the games and everything. He had everything in his spreadsheet, who scored what and who was likely. And it was so funny because we would watch the game forced to by our dad, and then he would say something, and then the reporter, the narrator, would actually say the same thing. So my two brothers and I were not real football fans, but that's interesting because he would always complain. I remember this when I was a kid, just, you know, these British people, they bring 4 teams to the World Cup when they should only have 1. So they send out England, and they sent out Wales and Scotland. I'm like, he was so offended. I'm like, I would always say, well, you know, they came up with these great ideas, so at least give them the chance to have that. Okay, let's watch a video so you don't have to bear with me.
Ball courts at the ruins that are like 1,000 years old or whatever. Didn't Mexico invent a game similar? Yeah. The one in
You mean the traditional pre-Hispanic games?
yes, the pre-Hispanic.
What's the question?
The pre-Hispanic games, that's very similar, where they're using ching-ching all over and getting it into a small hole, in this case.
It is similar, but not quite. You use your hip to play with them. It's out there. So it is a ball game. There are many ball games around the world, and the British came up with many of them. But football is the one thing that, this is the event that more people in the world, even than the Olympics, watch. But you brought me to the next hard question. How many World Cups has Mexico hosted?
3.
Which were the first? 3 years after our massacre yesterday, 1971. Then, and I'm saying this because Mexico is the only country in the world that has ever hosted 3 World Cups, and this is something you want to bring up as knowledgeable Americans when you're talking to Mexicans. 1986, and then 2026, okay? 1986 was also difficult, and we had some doubts whether we were going to be holding that, because what happened the year before, 1985? The earthquake was really hard. So Mexico was having doubts after the earthquake that it could hold the following year the World Cup. But of course, Mexicans said, we have to have that. Forget the earthquake, we're going to have this. Great, yes, good question about the pre-Hispanic games. Let's watch a video just to give you a sense of. This is just to end this little topic on the World Cup and for you to see how important and strong of a feeling it is for Mexicans. This is a song that they came up with when Mexico was on this winning streak. We were winning these games, and the country was excited, and we were all united, and I want you to see on a tiny video how important and how emotional this can be for Mexicans, okay? So I kind of wanted to show you a little bit of this intense emotion, and I ask you if you could see that somewhere in Mexico, could you feel it in your conversations with Mexicans or out in the street? Could you even feel it in Ajijic, how excited people were, how they were wearing these green T-shirts or jerseys? And of course, because we are talking politics, we need to go into politics, talking about the World Cup. What's the big political idea here in the World Cup? The question is, did President Sheinbaum attend that inaugural game we just discussed? Was she there? Was this a good thing for Mexicans or not? How did Mexicans react? What did they think about this? She was afraid. Why was she afraid? What was she fearful of? You're very good at that. Boo. I hope you don't use that here with my lectures. Keep that to yourself, Carlos. Yes. So President Miguel de la Madrid in 1986, he inaugurated the games in Mexico City, and he got these big boos. President Díaz Ordaz, remember him? When he inaugurated the Olympics in 1968, he got a big, loud boom. Boos in the Azteca Stadium are really loud. They have echo. They last forever. So she said, I am not going to endure this. You know, I'm the president of Mexico, whatever. I did not agree to have the World Cup here. I am not going to go. Me, I personally think that this was a bad decision. You know, you go there, you get your boost, that's part of the job. Not everyone loves you, but you're there. You're the head of a state. You're the leader of the country. You cannot not be in this very important event. So that was bad. Could it get worse than this regarding the World Cup and the president? It got worse. Why was it? So where was the World Cup ended? Where did it come to an end? Where? New York, New Jersey, right? So who was the head of the state there and then? So the question is, was President Sheinbaum there on that end game, or that final game? What did you think of that?
It's a state maneuver.
Okay, so I'll give you the Mexican version. We're in Mexico. The inaugural game is in my stadium, the Azteca. You're not there, but Donald Trump picks up the phone and says, come on over, Claudia. We'll have a good time. I'll give you the presidential balcony, right? And we can have a good time at the stadium. She gets on a plane and goes all the way to New Jersey. That was also very bad politics because people did not like this, you know? If she had been in Mexico City, oh, fine. Well, this is the end of the game. So I just want you to see the political spin because we are dealing with politics today. This was not good for her. I think that was, she could have said no to Donald Trump and that would have been a statement. And I don't think he would have minded too much because the Prime Minister of Canada were there. A lot of people were there. So, but do you agree? Do you think it made sense for her to respond to Donald Trump's call and go? Or if you were her advisor, would you have had her stay in Mexico City and not do that?
I think she was doing her job, and that, you know, Mexico is actually very dependent on the relationship. Everybody's very dependent on relationships with the U.S. And so actually, I think even if she had to like come down inside of herself, that she was doing it because for the betterment of the base of the people in Mexico and to keep, you know, keep a relationship active and open. I think it would have been terrible if she didn't. It's like you can't stop talking to those who have a lot of control over you.
Okay, that makes sense. Is everyone kind of in agreement generally? Was anything gained by talking to Donald Trump in that stadium in New Jersey? Did our USMCA freight trade agreement open up and beautiful? Did the wall come down? Did ICE get back home? Was anything, you know, these are the tough political questions that we need to ask. Because I get your point, you know, this is the President of the United States, the king of the world calling. How can you not go? And a lot of Mexicans are like, you don't. You know, he's disrespecting you and the country. This is a match game. This is a football game. We do care, but not really, not that much. So, you know, I don't want to give you a hard time. I'm just trying to make you see that if you read a little bit of the opposition editorials and columns in Mexico, you would understand how bad this decision was. Just like when I talked about President Peña Nieto yesterday, when he invited Donald Trump again to the presidential residence. Remember I told you, as a candidate, he was the Republican candidate for president, and our president only decided that he would invite him and Hillary over to Mexico City, which made no sense at all. And of course, Trump, who will take any and all opportunities to do this. This is the same rule regarding Mexico City in 2016, and then New York this year. So he plays people. He wasn't powerful at all when he was a candidate. So that was a big mistake, and he paid for it. You know, they prepaid dearly for bringing Donald Trump over. And you know, I tend to disagree with that anything was gained going there to talk to him. But yeah. Oh, I'll come back. Yes.
I wouldn't have went because he sends the Secretary of State to meet with me, the president, and then you're going to invite me somewhere? Nah.
You remember that from yesterday, yes.
I would have just said, thank you, but no thank you.
I would ask if Secretary Rubio is going to be president or not. But we're not going to go into that can of worms, okay? Thank you. Yes, I have someone else over here. Thank you, Larry.
I understand what you're saying about it wasn't a good thing that she didn't go to Mexico City. And I think, though, as far as Trump inviting her and she came, the thing is the power that he has over the import, and she knows how to play him.
Yes.
Much better than Canadian, because he stands up. I'm more like him, but she seems to know how to play him, and which is pretend you like him.
Yes.
And then he's nice to you. It's insane, but that's how you play a narcissist.
What you're saying is, well, she didn't win anything, but at least we didn't lose worse. Some of the things that we already had wrong. Yes, there's never a correct answer here. This is what political analysts do, consider the facts. But it's really interesting for me to hear your opinion because you're kind of not on the Mexican-centered world. Yes. Hey.
I wonder if it would have been framed very differently for the Mexican people if she had attended the inaugural game at Azteca and then gone to New Jersey.
Would it have been different? Yes, they would have totally approved the New Jersey trip if she had been. So that brings me to the question, where was Claudia when the World Cup was being inaugurated? She wasn't in the Azteca Stadium. Where were we to find her? You don't know? You didn't follow her social media to see where she was? She was at the Azcapotzalco borough head, government site with a very good Mexico City colleague and the Mexico City mayor watching on a screen the game, 20 miles or 15 miles from the Azteca Stadium, surrounded by her Morena supporters. So this was also a political thing. Yes?
I'd like you to comment on the spin that was given that the reason why she didn't go to the game was her protest of the prices and her giving her ticket to a young indigenous young lady.
Yes. That's a good question. Yeah, the official explanation was that she wanted to give her #1 numbered ticket to the stadium, and she indeed did, to an indigenous girl from Oaxaca, I think, who is an expert football player. You know, she can do this playing with a ball like even Pele couldn't, I think. So it's a good question, but so the president is giving this ticket to her, to this child, to this girl, where would you, if you're Mexican, where would you have expected to see this child at the time of the inaugural inside the stadium? So, in the president's seat, next to the FIFA crazy guy, right? So, you know, you always have to ask what happened, but why did this not happen? So the president is not there. We're Mexicans, we're looking at the stadium. The president is not there. We are expecting to see this girl sitting there, talking to the Infantino guy. We don't know where she, you know, if you ask me, I don't know where she was. I understand she was, and she was escorted in and the whole thing, but she did not have that place of honor that she eventually was given, or formally was given to the president. So we Mexicans who look at these little things like, how could she not be there if the president's not there? So yes, this was a good spin of the news. I don't think it worked very effectively. I don't think Mexicans bought it. And then we found out there was a FIFA, did you hear about the FIFA dinner, elegant ceremonial dinner at the Chapultepec Castle, Castillo de Chapultepec. So there, the FIFA organizers held a big dinner there, and there were the ambassadors and the FIFA delegates, and everyone else was there. And guess who was also there? The president. President Sheinbaum was there on this beautiful, and then she's on her daily press conferences, and one of the reporters asked, so Madam President, Madam President, is the Castillo de Chapultepec a place where public gatherings like this can be held? This is the National Museum of History. can we actually have a FIFA dinner there? Is that even allowed? Of course, she answers. We rented out the whole time for events. Big mistake too, because FIFA was charged $1 million to use the castle, the Castillo, for that dinner, and then she got into a lot of trouble because then she's there renting out the castle for $1 million and she's not in the stadiums. You know, it gets a little complicated. And now there's an audit and there's a whole thing going on of what happened. So the question always is where? Where is the president? Where is the girl? Where are the $1 million that were spent on that? So yes, you know, this is just getting too in-depth into the thing. I know you probably didn't even know the president wasn't there, but I want you to see the political side of things and how important and how strong it can be for some Mexicans that she wasn't there, and then she was in the high fashion principals dinner, and then she decided to go with President Trump. So the World Cup was a nice topic up to the video. I'm sorry I messed it up. I made it worse. But yeah, I just kind of wanted you, and again, I know it's, I commend you on your effort to put yourself in your Mexican shoes to view this, because we look at these things very differently than you would, which makes total sense, right? This is why the U.S. government employed me, because they wanted a Mexican view on U.S. policy, which is a lot of the work I did. Yes?
Hello. My wife is watching on Zoom, and she would like to remind you to repeat the question so that people on Zoom know what's been asked. When someone asks you a question, can you repeat it?
Yes, yes. I'm sorry, I have completely ignored our Zoom audience. I am not used to doing this simultaneously on Zoom, so I apologize. I'm usually, someone records a little bit and then they put it out on the internet or something, but doing it simultaneously, I'm sorry. We did this a year ago like this, and I got some very interesting questions over Zoom, so I'm hoping Matt or someone was reading them out to me, and that's perfect. And yes, I will, the whole point of throwing the microphone at people is so they can, everyone can hear, but I get that the questions are loud sometimes. Yes, I'll be happy to repeat them. Yeah.
It seems like the difference between the U.S. from the way we look at this, can analyze it from a U.S. point of view, from the way it differs from the Mexican point of view is in the sense of the dignity of Mexico.
More than dignity, we love the word sovereignty. You know, we don't want our sovereignty touched at all. I do think that question going through. I'll try to decide whether the question was heard over Zoom or not. But yeah, sovereignty is a big word. Whenever I speak about the Mexican-U.S. relationship, I do go on sovereignty, because this is always, there's so many things the U.S. can do to hurt or to damage our sovereignty. One example I like to give is, because you don't hear about sovereignty a lot in the U.S. I was surprised, what was it, a couple of years ago, Biden was president, and there were these balloons coming over Washington State, I think, or Oregon or somewhere, and then some U.S. officials were saying, this violates U.S. sovereignty. And I'm like, so they do know the word, right? I was really surprised. We use it every day, but hearing about U.S. sovereignty, I was really surprised. And they shoot down the balloons and all that. But yes, we like to use our sovereignty a lot. And you can be right in saying that it was more sovereign to be in the Azteca Stadium than in the New Jersey or New York Stadium, perhaps. So yeah, that is a very good point. And it'll come over in politics every time. Okay, I'll rush to our, so if I ever get there because of the World Cup, we're trying to go to from the hegemony that we talked about yesterday to multi-party politics, the evolution of electoral. So I'll try to make this first part easy. We do need to look at the legal thing of the electoral system in Mexico. I'm not going to bore you with too much of a law degree for you, but I think it's important to understand how the law was changed, influenced by those social events we saw yesterday, remember? The earthquake, the 1968 massacre, the Zapatista rebellion in 1994, all of those play a role. And then after our break, we'll go into this effective suffrage, National Electoral Institute. We'll look at the history, I like to say heroic history of the National Electoral Institute, which started as the Federal Electoral Institute, and you'll learn how elections are held. And then many of the questions that you had yesterday about districts and representatives and some things will come into that in a topic, because it'll explain a lot to you about how elections are held, when the timing and the scheduling of them. And I think you'll find really interesting how much Mexicans have worked on that INE Institute that is still attempting to be reformed as we speak. This year there was an attempt to do that. President Sheinbaum tried to do some changes that the opposition and even some of the members of her coalition, political coalition, did not agree with, so we'll go into that, okay? Any questions so far? Any complaints? Those are also allowed. We might bring down the volume, but you can, yes.
So I did actually have a question, but this may not be the time for it. And it was about your comment yesterday about autonomous institutions are losing ground. And I wanted to hope that at some point you would connect that to the transparency issues or article or whatever it's called in Mexico, because I've been reading a lot about that in terms of many of the international and local regional projects that are underway.
Thank you for that. So she's asking about the autonomous institutions that we've been losing, transparency and all that. The good news is I will talk about that in detail. I even have a couple of slides about that. The bad news is you'll have to be here Thursday to hear it, because that part of what I'm talking about is institutions, about democratic institutions, which I think these are: transparency, freedom of the press, all of those. They have been suffering lately, and by Thursday, all over the world, with the lead of the U.S., sadly. But yes, I will go into that, and you will see how many, and we will ask ourselves whether Mexicans even know or care that this is happening. Or are Americans also, do they know the great institutions that the post-World War II the United States created that are being lost daily in this administration? But yes, good news and bad news, we'll talk about it, but maybe Thursday, okay? So I had there, so yesterday we talked about political events, social events, things that happen in the country that led us to this democratic path. So I wanted you to understand why the people thought, the Mexican people thought a change was needed, and we saw those events. Today we're going to see the results of those. So some things happened, and then an electoral reform. Les encargo. Again, like yesterday, I've highlighted the three that I think we need to look very careful into, but there's always been, on these 30 years, a lot of reforms that have been implemented along the way. We're perfecting. Like we said yesterday, we have 3 constitutions since we became independent. I want to think that we've improved with every one of them. A lot of people have doubts on that, but as these new reforms come up, the democratic institutions were improved. However, and on Thursday we'll see that, nowadays those reforms are not being as good for democracy, we think, as they should be, okay? So we have 1917, which is the Constitution we talked about. That's when we agreed we would have a federal electoral system very much like the United States, which is a continuation of 1821 and 1857. Now, electoral reforms in 1946. See, all of those are pretty much before the 68 student massacre. I'll point out what happened in the 1946 reform. Stronger political associations were allowed. Not independent candidacies, that would come later, but the government said, okay, you can have your political association and bring issues, not political parties, but just it's allowed to gather some friends and talk about politics and see what the government is doing and what changes could be. That was a big change. Because someone was asking yesterday about what's needed to become a political party. To become a political party in Mexico, you first need to be a political association. You need to have a given number of members. You need to have a lot of signatures. There's a few requirements that will allow you to become a formal political party. I talk about that a little bit on. Then 1953, that's right there. Women can vote. That was the year women were allowed to vote, and then the whole country went lost, and we lost our way because that had, I'm just kidding. It actually took a very long time. 1953 is a lot later than some other countries. I can't remember the US, but the US was 1921, so there was a very more years before that. And then I'll also mention 1969, that's right there. So we moved the age for voting from 21, we brought it down to 18, which is still how it is. Mexicans can get a voting card at 18 and vote starting at 18. They can drink alcohol at 18, they can drive at 18, they become men and women in full when they turn 18. When I was in the US, I had my third year of college in the US, so I arrived in Kansas, in Topeka, where I studied, right after, like 2 weeks after my 21st birthday. And I was so thankful that that had happened, because I was surprised to learn that to drink inside a bar, you had to be 21, or anywhere, I guess, you had to be 21 in the US. I think that's still the case. Does it change from state to state, or is that like a general thing? 21. I can see many faces like that should change really fast, but we're not going to go into that topic. Okay. Yes, and then we'll focus on 1977. There was this candidate who won with 100% of the vote, remember? In 1976, that brought about the 77 reform. 1990, we had a huge electoral fraud in 1988, big thing. So an electoral reform came in 1990 to change that. And then we had 1996 when we kind of liked the idea of free and fair elections, and we created the Electoral Institute in 1996. It's not that old, and that changed the whole thing. What happened in 1996? The elections, instead of being held, organized, and instituted by the government, they were moved to the people. Now it's citizens who organize, decide where the ballots are going to be cast. All of the decisions are made now by citizens with government funding through independent agencies. So the INE is an independent agency funded by the government. But no one from the government, no cabinet member, no one is actually leading it, or that has been changing lately, but this is an independent agency that happens to hold elections and organize elections federally and helping each state to hold their own elections, okay? And 2002, 2005, 2007, all of the rest, we even had an electoral reform in 2026, like I just mentioned, that didn't go very well. President Sheinbaum only got a little bit of what she wanted. So electoral reforms are a way to understand Mexican democracy, and it's happening all the time. I don't see that happening as much in the US federally. I think it's more like the states, the gerrymandering, the districts, the do we vote for this? I think those are things that each state handles, and it kind of makes it more free and independent, but also very messy. In Mexico, we have a centrist federal system that decides for everyone, and then the states just have a few leeway here and there for the gubernatorial elections or the local elections.
I wondered how they dealt with someone who got 100% of the vote. How did they artificially make that go away? I didn't understand that.
That was also solved by cynicism. You know, they would just say, we won. What did y'all, 1988, which was also really bad, is like, they're just reading the bad media. You're just reading the wrong newspapers, because these are always beautiful. Eventually, history will tell you that this was just, so that's interesting, because the 68 massacre and then the 76 fraud with 100% made the president himself say, we cannot continue winning with 100% of the, you know, it doesn't speak good of us to Mexicans, much less to the rest of the world. We need to do something to appear that we're more democratic, and that's,
What did they do?
hold your horses, we'll get there. That's the 1977, yes. Yes.
Compare and contrast. U.S., it's free for everyone to vote. We just have to sign up. You said yesterday that it was expensive to vote. Doesn't that, you tell me, what's going to change on that so that the poorer people can also have their voice heard?
Well, the expensive part has to do with how much it costs to vote. So the fair, clear, better democratic system costs more than something that's not as well looked at or regulated. So that is one of my slides. So everyone has the right to vote, but in order for that poor person or wealthy person to have an ID card, a transparent ballot box, a ballot, that takes money, federal money. So the Mexican government has an allocation on the federal budget every year in January, saying we will give so much money to the IFE to hold the elections this year, depending on if there's a federal election or what. But yeah, the cost of I get your question, but what I'm thinking of is how much it costs the country to have fair elections institutionally. You know, the INE comes at a cost, but this is a right for everyone.
The whole world has that situation. Why do they have to pay to vote?
No, oh, I see what you're saying. That was in one of the videos yesterday. So you get a social development program. You get a subsidy from the government. So the government comes, makes you sign a question, gives you a federal food subsidy or housing subsidy, and then the government expects you to vote for them. That is what's been happening with Morena. But this is not an official mechanism. This is you sign your name. They may ask you to become a member of the Morena party, the ruling party, and then they are expecting you to vote. And this works so well that pretty much of the 32 states, 27 pretty much are governed, have governors of Morena. So it's a system that works very well, but that is even more expensive than holding free elections because there's just so much money you can give, and this is bankrupting the country or putting in a lot of debt because these social programs will go into that. Are good for the people, but people become dependent on them. Some people actually just live from those. It's about 6,000 pesos every 2 months. So to a very poor family, like you're saying, that is a lot of money, you know? So of course I will go and vote for the ruling party that is giving me this money, okay? Yes?
How much do they charge for the ID cards, or are those just given freely, you go in and
Nothing.
sign up for it?
Not 1 peso, that all comes for free, yes. And you can lose it, break it, and then they'll give you another one right away, yes. And it's a very, very efficient, very secure and very efficient system. You open a bank account in Mexico, and they'll ask you for that, and they will check with the INE whether it's really you, and you'll put your fingernail there, your fingerprint, I'm like, your fingerprint there, and they will check that it's really you. So it's a very costly but very efficient system, yes.
The 6,000 pesos every 2 months that I understand that that's a program for like women over 60.
The elderly, yes.
Okay, so it's not like everybody. It's like providing for women over 60 and all women over 60.
Everyone, regardless of your wealth.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes,
and
you're
then
right.
Okay, well, I just want to know what the parameters, because it's very different, and then, you know, children programs and
Yes.
whatever. Yeah.
We weren't going to be talking about that right now. But yes, President Sheinbaum came into office and said, hey, 60 is too old for women. We'll bring down the age to 55. You know how many votes she got from that? And you know how much it cost the country to give those millions of additional women, older women, that income. But also you need to see that when grandmother gets this subsidy from the government, that is the whole family income. You know, a whole Mexican family can live off that. So you need, yes, every 2 months, 3 months, 3,000 a month. So when Lopez Obrador, our previous president, goes out and says, we have reduced poverty, you know, the abject poverty numbers have come down, this is true because now people have, so that immediately moves people out of poverty. Is that important, that subsidy? But it is costly indeed. You know, there's a lot of debt that we are incurring because these programs are forever. They're constitutional. Guess where those programs, just one of the last amendments to our Constitution was to include those women's rights of getting this money on the Constitution. There's an article on that, of course.
Minimum wage and kind of like, what do people actually live on? It would be very interesting to know.
We'll get to that later on. It's a good question because the minimum wage goes hand in hand with the subsidies. But yeah, we'll get to that.
Is that how the cartel basically wins favors of the people, is by taking care of them?
So you're the leader of the parish church, you're a priest, and the cartel leader comes and say, hey, I'll build your church. We just need a few hands, a few helping hands in your congregation. And suddenly there's this beautiful golden marble church coming out of nowhere, and everyone is like, people must be wealthy around here. There are so many cases of that. And that works with politics, with organizations, with, the cartels have a long hand and a lot of money to give, but they will expect to be paid back eventually. Yes. And that is a big deal currently, in current affairs. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I forgot about the questions. That was about the cartels being involved with money in the community. Yes, income.
Well, philosophically, you're talking about all these subsidies to people. Well, what else is the government supposed to be spending its money on but helping people? The money should go to helping people. So you say, I don't know what, I can't see any difference in any government anywhere in saying, here are the benefits that we're going to give you, and they do that very much expecting a vote. It's not unique to Mexico, and that's not bribery. That's, if you're providing services for people, well, the people are going to want to vote for you.
I always like tough questions. But this is not personal, is it? I'm just kidding. So the question was, she's asking why the government subsidies are not considered as helping the people or as giving them assistance as a government service, which is a fair question. What happens, the way I see it, subsidies are not wrong in themselves. Do they bring people out of poverty? Yes. The difference is to give you that cash handout, because these subsidies are a card with money. These are debit cards. I give it to you, and you go to the ATM to get your 6,000 pesos, right? If your husband comes and takes it from you and goes to get drunk at the cantina, that's your deal. The kind of help from the government I'm really focused on, that I would like to see more, is the education secretary coming and having a clean, painted, well-paid teacher there and a good facility, because this is a good information data point for you. For many years, since the revolution until 2018, what do you think the most expensive cabinet office was, the cabinet, the government agency was? Who took the biggest money? In the US, who takes most of the money? The Pentagon. Here in Mexico, until 2018, the Public Education Secretariat was the most expensive agency. More money went there than anywhere else. Ask me now, who is getting most of the money in the federal government? The Well-being Secretariat. The Secretariat, the agency in charge of making these debit cards that they give to people, is the most expensive agency we have ever had. More expensive than the SEP, than the Public Education Secretariat, which is now below it. So what I want you to see is, in order to create this debit card that I'm going to give you as a cash thing, I have taken the money out of the Education Secretariat. I have taken the money out of the public health system. I have not bought the X-ray machine that this hospital needs. That's when I say the government spending can be very good. And when I was saying yesterday that someone in the US was asking the audience in 2019, do you remember when there was a government? That was because a lot of government services that Americans took for granted, you never noticed them. These things happen on their own. And suddenly a new administration comes and takes that money away. Then you notice, and then you know that the weather service or whatever was coming because there was a proficient government agency with well-paid education. So what I want you to see is that teacher in that rural school is not getting well paid and is protesting in Mexico City, and his school is coming down without paying anything because we needed that money to create the debit card that his grandmother would get. So is the money actually flowing out to Mexicans? Yes, but they have these free reign. It's a bit like food stamps. I don't think in the US you can buy alcohol with food stamps, can you? We need these restrictions because you have no idea how much alcohol is bought with this debit well-being. So the well-being is how, I'm saying well-being is the name of the program of Bienestar. Bienestar, that is a government agency. Like I just said, it's the most expensive agency now. And it's the one in charge to go to your house, give you the card, and kind of take your signature and sort of suggest you become a member of the party. Do you have to do all of that? Not at all. And then it is really interesting because it's so political, these debit cards, that a lot of wealthy former governors, people who do not need the card at all, go and register for it, right? Who is going to say no to 6,000 pesos every 2 months, however wealthy you are? You know, money is a big thing. So they get their faces on the front pages of papers and say, look at him, I thought he hated these well-being programs, and now he's asking for a debit card with subsidies. So again, just to complete, I like your question because it's fair and it's very good, but I want you to see that some of the money has to come from somewhere, and you have to take the money from somewhere to give it directly to the people, and you have to incur in debt, which we have done huge. You know, the debt, the national debt from 2018, when President Lopez Obrador arrived, to now is twice the amount. We have doubled the national debt. Again, because these programs are forever, they never end. Some people even die and the money is still being, you know, it needs a lot of administration and regulating. Do I think it's a terrible idea? No, I think they make sense if they were handled differently, less politically. Yeah. Yes?
2 questions. Who started that Bienestar? Who started it, and how does one qualify for that? And how do they check? I mean, I could just show up and I'm, you know, age 55 and I'm okay to get it?
Yes. This takes you to the, so she's asking how you get to the welfare subsidies. How is it, who started the program, and how do you get the benefits from it? So the one who started it was President Lopez Obrador. So you must know, what was the job Lopez Obrador had before becoming president? I think I asked this a year ago. Mayor of Mexico City. You know how they say in the US that when you're the mayor of New York, your next step is to become president? Here, the same, you know, the mayor of Mexico City is a big political position. So what was Claudia Sheinbaum's job before becoming president? Mayor of Mexico City. So President Lopez Obrador, when he became mayor of Mexico City in 2000, along with Vicente Fox, he started the program in Mexico City, small, and he started, and people loved it, and they have never lost Mexico City ever since. When he became president, of course, he said, we need this nationally. What do you need to prove now that you're a woman and that you're 55? And if you're a man, whether you're a man or a woman, you need to be 60. How do you prove your age? You take your IFE card, your INE card, and you say, you go, where do you go to get registered?
No matter how much no matter how rich you are.
There's no, you're Mexican, you have reached the age, you have earned this. So, you know, I can tell you, my mother has her card. Could she survive without it? I think so. But of course she has her card.
I mean, if you're a millionaire, you can qualify for that.
Yes. If you're a millionaire, you still can have your card. That's what I was saying. There's a lot of people saying, the government is going to give me a handout in cash. Of course I'm going to go take it, even if you have $1 billion in the Bahamas, right? Yes. And these, because people so often misunderstand me criticizing the program in its essence. No, I think it's bad because it's badly implemented. I don't think we should be giving money to people who do not need it, really, because there's no study of socioeconomic, there's no tax returns, there's nothing. You just show your card, and then you go to the welfare, well-being secretariat, you say, I'm this, and then you'll get a card issued, and the government will deposit money there directly. But again, I have to underscore that money is not being allocated to other things, because this is happening. And this has happened, you know, if you look at the US now, It's not like the money is being saved to pay the national debt. Those agencies that the Trump administration is doing away with. That money is allocated to different agencies, to different, or in the same agency, whatever program was being funded. I'm not going to say that much, but it crossed my mind.
In the U.S., it doesn't matter what your income, you still get Social Security.
But you worked for it, didn't you?
Yes, you did work for it, yeah.
That's a good point, because we have Afores. Ever heard of Afores? We have pension plans. You work your whole life, you make a savings on, the government doesn't administer it. These are private companies, and then the government puts another part on it, and then you get a pension when you reach the age, and you negotiate it with the government and all that. But you've earned that over work for years. Yeah. Here, you just need to reach the age. That's all you need, and be Mexican.
What's the name of the pension plan in Mexico?
The pension plan is called Afores. These are retirement funds. There's Afores, and there's a central agency, privately owned by the companies, that actually administers it. So I have Social Security as an Afore. So I have savings, and then if I worked with quotas to the Mexican National Security Institute, the IMSS provides health services, and then it saves some of your income. So you make a saving, and your employer has to put a similar amount to that. When will you get it? When you retire, when you're 60 or older, but not before that. But the money is coming where? From your wages. The money is there being administered partly by the government, but mostly by private companies. Yes, Afores.
Just one more.
Yes.
I know you want to get off of this, so I say if you
I think
want
you
to talk about it afterwards.
I think you've just ruined my whole presentation.
There's a really upcoming idea in the States about basic minimum income, not just in the States, but worldwide, which this is much more similar to. And there's some pretty strong arguments for it, rather than getting into lots of regulations that we can talk about during the break if we want to.
This is the minimum wage you mentioned, right? Yeah.
Basic.
Universal salary. Yes, yes. So he's asking about getting this universal salary thing. I hear that linked a lot to AI. Like AI is going to do all our work, so we should all be getting paid the same. Yeah. In Mexico, I haven't heard that much, but this is really similar to that. Other than the age thing, you need no other requirement. You need to present no proof of income or anything to get that. And that, to me, that sounds very socialist. I'm not sure, maybe you may disagree. This is what Marx and the Soviets wanted, and look where that took us.
I think it's important that you have to explain that people is afraid to lose the benefit of that card if they don't vote for Morena. And in many places, the workers from Morena goes around the little towns, and they said, if you don't vote, you can lose it, which is a lie, because it's in the Constitution. But also, the problem is that because he spent the money in that, the president, we don't have medications in the pharmacies. So now they have to spend the money to buy the medications. So they are not really rich now, because now they have to spend the money in the medications you're supposed to have from the government free.
Yeah, because I'm not saying that everybody uses this money to go to the cantina and get lost. No, that's not the case. But that's right. You know, it's interesting that you bring this up. So what he's saying is that people vote for this Morena party, this coalition, because they're afraid that these subsidies will be taken away. One thing that was done, of course, was putting them inside the Constitution. So there's a constitutional article that whoever is in government must provide those subsidies. That was done only a couple of years ago. President Sheinbaum signed it into law. So this is now. Now, of course, the Mexican Constitution can be more easily amended than the U.S. Constitution. We've done that 1,000 times. So could that change again? Yes. I'm going to bring up, you know, this of course wasn't in the plans, but that's the whole point. I'm going to talk about the Coahuila local elections we had a few months back. So in Coahuila, they had local elections for the local Congress and for municipalities. And the governor, I don't think the governor yet, but just they had to change their local deputies and their municipalities. In Coahuila, a border state. So what happened there was that the PRI won. The PRI has been doing a very good job of governing the state. They have a PRI governor. They like him. He seems to be doing fine. But what happened there, be very careful. This was a local election that did not have anything to do with a federal election that would affect the Morena hold on power and the subsidies. So people knew that even if they voted for the opposition, their subsidies would not be lost because this was not a federal election, something Mexico City could decide on. This was just the Saltillo, Coahuila thing, a state thing. So guess who won? The PRI won, easily. You know, and Morena members and Morena leaders were really offended that this could happen in this day and age. But you're right, you know, I agree with you. People are afraid to lose these subsidies, and this is why we have most of the states governed by Morena. This is an exception, actually, Jalisco. But people do not want to lose those subsidies, of course, and that turns into politics, sadly. So it is a very good way. Do they put a gun on their heads and say, you have to vote for us? No, they simply easily and willfully vote for Morena because they want this money to keep flowing, okay? What time is it, Didi? Okay. We got to one slide. I'm very proud of you. I'll just play a video of you for you next time and in the next hour. One video will tell you about don't worry about that, it's very legalized. And then we can go on to speak about the INE and many of these issues that you brought up. Thank you, thank you. You've made this hour on your own, so thank you for that. We'll be back in 10 minutes, please. All right. 10 Mexican, is it 25?
Hyacinth, can you hear me? Am I not correct, or am I correct that the Congress now is mandated to have 50% women delegates? And if so, when did that start?
Catherine, the group at the St. Andrews are on a break right now, so the speaker may not be available to answer you right now.
Thanks. Okay. I thought maybe the question would go to Hyacinth, who's monitoring the
Your
the
question,
Zoom.
your question is appearing on the Zoom chat.
Okay, I'm trying to get to Zoom chat unsuccessfully, but I'll try again.
Okay, move your mouse down to the bottom of the page and the word chat will show up.
Yeah, I have to do it on, I think the problem is I'm on my iPhone and it's hard to do. So I'll do it downstairs on the iPad.
Okay.
Thank you, Lauren. Hi,
Okay.
how are you?
But the speaker won't be listening. The speaker might be able to hear you if he were in the room, but he's probably out getting coffee or something.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that Hyacinth would get my question because she's monitoring Zoom.
Okay, but you're speaking your question. You're not literally typing it in
Yeah.
chat, don't think.
I'll do it the other way. I'll type it also.
Type it in chat, and then somebody is supposed to be reading them and giving them to the speaker.
Yes, that's what I'll do. Thank you.
Okay, but it might be a few minutes before they get back to you.
Right. I'll get rest while they're on break.
Right. Okay.
I've been watching in bed.
Well, that's a good thing to do.
Yes, I'm up in Oregon, so I'm on an earlier time zone, you know.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, we're at the beach.
Oh, very nice. Okay.
With my grandchildren and my daughter, and it's very nice.
Oh, that's lovely. Did you watch yesterday's session on Zoom too?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I was there in person yesterday, so I don't know who was on Zoom. But
yeah, I thought it was excellent.
Yeah, I'm very impressed, and you know,
I'm fascinated by it. It's just really interesting.
Right, and it's easy to, you know, understand his opinion and what's happening. And you know, I knew about the 6,000 peso pension, but I didn't know opinions on how it got established and, you know, where it was taking the money from and those
Yeah,
kinds
you know,
of things.
apparently my question was, you know, Dee Dee and Lynn Creek are citizens of Mexico.
Yes.
So are they eligible to get the 6,000 pesos?
I do
Probably.
not know. I do not know. Presumably they have an INE card.
They do, and they can vote.
I really have no idea whether they've actually gone to try.
Yeah, well, if they haven't, maybe they should.
You know,
every 6,000 pesos makes a difference.
Hey, Catherine, I know Dee Dee gets her pension, and she's giving it to, I think, one of her employees to
That's great.
to help them.
That's great.
Yeah, because she doesn't need it, but
Can you
she's
hear me
entitled
talking
to
now?
it, and she
It's
figured
clear?
I can
Okay.
redistribute the wealth.
Good. So I guess
Larry?
you're working.
Yeah, okay, great idea.
Wonderful.
Yeah, okay. Honestly, I never thought about that particular issue.
I was wondering this, it's Trudy. I was wondering the same thing, Catherine. And I think what Dee Dee is doing is great.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And it definitely is going to help some family. Or even
Yes.
if she splits it between 2 employees, you know, I mean, every bit helps for many of the Mexicans. They're really living on the edge.
Yeah, the thought that 6,000 a month can support a whole family is just wow. That's
Living next to the edge.
yep.
Well, good to talk to you all. Hi, Trudy.
Yes.
Hi, someone
Colleen.
else.
It's Colleen.
Colleen. Oh,
Yes.
hi.
Hi.
I missed
Great.
the first half hour, and I'm really sorry because this has been a great discussion so far.
Well, Trudy, it's being recorded, and so you can watch back once they put it up online again, so you can hear the
I
rest.
will. I'm just impatient.
I know
Yeah,
how
and
you feel.
the first half hour, he talked a lot about the soccer game
Yeah.
and
Yes.
the political implications of whether Sheinbaum went to the stadium
Right.
for the opening ceremony, which she did not do, and apparently she gave her ticket to a soccer star young woman, but
Yeah,
that young woman wasn't seated in the president's seat. She did,
Yes.
however, go to New York,
Oh,
and that was also controversial.
I heard some of that. I really want to hear the lead in. I did follow the soccer news. In fact, I just deleted my soccer alerts from the Guardian because I realized I didn't need to know anymore. But yeah, I'm finding this really good. I liked yesterday too.
Yeah, I learned a lot.
Yeah,
He's a good speaker. He's clear.
I'm very impressed. You know, I knew bits of it, but not people's opinion about what
Right.
happened.
It's nice to have Carlos, Heidi's beau, there too, that can tell us about what it's like to be a Mexican he was in the
He was at-
university during the
Yes.
massacre. I mean,
Right.
wow.
That was amazing. That
Right. I thought that was
he
a
was
very
there.
interesting point too, because he's probably the only person we know that actually was at the student riots.
Right. Right.
I also think he brings a depth to the conversation today in understanding what, the fear and why people think they have to get Moreno and what.
Yes.
And I'm impressed with several people in the audience who are quite well informed on many issues, but the connection that Carlos keeps bringing back to Mexico is really fascinating.
Yeah, I'm
I'd love
grateful.
to have him give a talk at UU.
Yeah, good idea.
That's a great idea. Yeah, because he's been really, I found his memory yesterday, wow.
Yes.
Being there when they were shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And Rat had to run.
And what I've been struck by is how recent Mexico's current democracy is.
Yeah.
How new.
Right.
Yes, and how vibrant it is. My goodness, the changes and the involvement. I remember when I first moved to Mexico in Baja, that's about the time Fox won. And Baja was always pan, but they were kind of written off as not an important state. And they were just so passionate. And I had no understanding about the history with PRI and so forth. It was so exciting to watch that happen and roll out. And that's just the last couple, 3 decades.
Right. Yeah, that's neat that you were there.
Hello? Oh, now it's on. I'd like to make one announcement. The people who are on Zoom would appreciate if you started talking when you get the mic, when the mic is at your mouth. So don't start and then start talking, okay? Because they're missing some of the questions.
Oh,
Okay? Thank you.
We're just waiting for the session to start again and chatting among ourselves.
Thank you, Dee Dee.
Great program, Dee Dee. I'm going to turn off my ability to speak.
I got thirsty from all these tough questions I've been getting, and we needed to get some air here because brains working make a lot of heat in the room. So it's a good thing the doors were open. Okay. So I will run one video for you that is pretty much. So 20 years after 1968, another date that I think is really important that you remember is 1988, politically. And to give you a break from me, we'll watch this video.
Está en plan.
So just to give you the Salinas de Gortari. So in 1988, we had a presidential election. Carlos Salinas de Gortari won by a big fraud that was harder to implement than in 1976, when there was just cards and everything was hard copy. Everything was paper. In 1988, guess what? Computers have arrived. So the Mexican government instituted a computer system to count the votes, and amazingly, it broke down. It shut down in midnight after the election, when the opposition candidate was winning, and then when the operating system came back to life, Carlos Salinas had won from the right, of course. So he won, I think he got 43%, so it wasn't a big majority, but the other guy was almost over 50%, so they did change the diskettes. Remember those? The diskettes and the 3.5s and all of those. But Carlos Salinas. Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas. Remember Lázaro Cárdenas? His son, Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, was the presidential contender, and we really think he won, but he was stolen of that election. So 1988 is really important, so important that a lot of along with 68 and the student massacre, a lot of the democratic changes that came after were a result of this fraud. People were really tired of seeing this cynical way of doing frauds, okay? Let me try to cue it. I hope I get it right.
Del sistema del partido hegemónico a solo unos días de las elecciones. Con ley seca y una afluencia nunca vista de votantes, las elecciones se llevaron a cabo el 6 de julio. En una jornada en la que se registró una gran cantidad de irregularidades, las casillas llenas de quejas fueron el factor común. revistas del día siguiente ya circulaban con Salinas como ganador. También hubo borrado de la tinta en las boletas, retención de credenciales, destrucción de boletas y padrones electorales incompletos, todos estos orquestados por las tradicionales trampas electorales del PRI. Sin embargo, y a pesar de todo alrededor, a las 6 de la tarde, desde la Secretaría de Gobernación, se informó que Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas lideraba los conteos. Las alarmas se encendieron en el PRI. Se habían prometido resultados preliminares para esas horas, y en los medios había silencio absoluto. Y cuando se esperaba alguna noticia, mágicamente se cayó el sistema.
Nos acaban de confirmar la información que daba el Comisionado de Acción Nacional, en el sentido de que efectivamente el sistema de cómputo no está funcionando, de que está callado, de que está caído.
El ambiente en las instalaciones del partido oficial pasó de festivo a tenso, pues los organizadores habían venido aplazando la hora del anuncio. Cuando los candidatos fueron informados de lo acontecido, decidieron manifestar su inconformidad ante las autoridades electorales. Bartlett se comunicó con el presidente de la Madrid. Años después reconoció que el mandatario le solicitó no dar a conocer las cifras que se tenían en ese momento. Durante la caída del sistema, simpatizantes de los candidatos se presentaron en las oficinas de la Secretaría de Gobernación y a las 9:45 llegaron los candidatos.
There on the right-hand side is Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas. In the middle, the heavy-set guy is Cloutier, Manuel Cloutier from the PAN, National Arc Party. And on the left is Mrs. Piedra, who eventually became a National Human Rights Commissioner. And she was, I think she was the Labour Party, Partido de Trabajo, also a presidential candidate then. These were the three people Carlos Salinas were up against. And we got to a point in '88 where there were actually other candidates. There were other political parties. They could be registered. So much in contrast to 1976. So things had moved up a bit.
10 minutos después, les permitieron entrar a las instalaciones, donde dentro se encontrarían con Bartlett, quien ante la intranquilidad de los candidatos les dijo: no prejuzguemos, sus imputaciones no están sustentadas.
I hate stopping videos, but I'll do that here because Bartlett dead. There's Carlos Salinas, the candidate. Carlos Bartlett is Manuel Bartlett is the government secretary, the chief of the government secretariat, pretty much the interior ministry, right? So this is the agency that used to hold elections at this time. So who set up the ballots, the voting places and all of that? The government did through the government secretariat. There was no INE yet here. So he is the one who had to report that the system had broken down, that there was no uncertainty, that everything was fine, that we'll plug the computer back and everything will be fine. So he had to do all of that. This was before the PRD. Remember the Party of the Democratic Revolution? But it was called the Cardenista Front for Democracy. It was a party lead very shortly, only for that election, and then it became the Party of the Democratic Revolution, PRD. You probably heard. That's the party through which López Obrador won the Mexico City mayoral election in 2000. And then he moved out of there and created his own party. Okay?
Estamos viviendo un proceso limpio, democrático. La caída del sistema duró 6 horas. Cuando volvieron a tener acceso a las cifras, Carlos Salinas lideraba la votación. Y a la 1:35 de la mañana, el presidente del PRI, Jorge de la Vega Domínguez, anunció el triunfo de Salinas de Gortari, describiéndolo como rotundo, contundente y legal. El 13 de julio se dieron a conocer los resultados de los cómputos. La apabullante dimensión de la victoria priista que producían los resultados oficiales era evidente. El PRI tenía el premio mayor, pues su candidato había sido oficialmente acreditado con un poco menos del 49% de la votación total, lo que le daba un cómodo margen sobre sus más fuertes contendientes. El resultado ya estaba, y por más lucha ante un fraude inminente, no cambiaría el rumbo de las cosas. Meses después, todas las boletas fueron quemadas para eliminar toda la evidencia del fraude. El PRD nacería un año después, y luego en 1990 nació el Instituto Federal Electoral. Cuauhtémoc.
That's all you need to know. 1 year later, in 1990, the Federal Electoral Institute was born. And yes, the ballots themselves usually would be stored under the Chamber of Deputies, under Congress, in the basement. That's where law required that they'll be kept in case there needed to be a recount or something. So suddenly someone had a cigarette, lighted up a match, and everything was gone, very conveniently. So we were they using computers now? Yes. In 1988, yes. Oh, because you put on a ballot, you count it, you have a computer in the voting place, and then it's sent out of Mexico City over a computer. I think, not even internet, I think, again, the disks. Remember those floppy disks? Don't tell me you never used any of those. Those floppy disks would be sent to Mexico City. Floppy disks, yes. And that information would arrive there. You'll learn a little bit more about how that's done, learning about the IFE, which I hope you let me do, explain to you the IFE. But yes, this was what I'm trying to get to you is this 88 fraud was so cynical, so we don't care. This is how we're going to do it. In Spanish, those of you who speak Spanish, the President Miguel de la Madrid, who was the president when this election happened, he was the one who was there when the earthquake, remember? Miguel de la Madrid had a conversation and he was telling, the reporter was asking him, el sistema se cayó, pero con Y, no con doble L. So the system crashed, but it did not remain silent. It just broke down a bit. So it's easier to understand in Spanish, but they were very good at using the right words, to say the message. But of course, Mexicans did not buy it. We did not believe that this had happened, and we were really very frustrated that Carlos Saniras de Gortari, who happened to be not as bad a president economically as we thought, but corruption and all that, all of the things that were already happening remained when he was there, of course, right? And then there was another pre-president, and then Vicente Fox came. The other pre-president was President Cedillo. Remember that video we saw yesterday? There's the president talking on television saying, I can confirm to you that the IFE has enough information to say that Vicente Fox will be the new president of the Republic. That was one of the most historic presidential addresses ever in Mexican history. That was July of 2000, okay? So we still have a way to go to that, but we were moving there because the 1990 electoral reform and then 1996 really changed the system and really made it finally valid, free elections for everyone, okay? The registration, the whole thing. I'll jump right into that part to tell you the story of the INE, which is really worth it. So here it's just, I think we should talk about Mexican muralism one of these days. I've given those lectures before because we had a movement with Diego Rivera and a lot of people in the early 20th century, and this is some of the result. Anyone has seen this in Mexico City? Can you place it? Where is it, do you think, Carlos? I just mentioned that place a little while ago. Castillo de Chapultepec. Chapultepec Castle, up on the hill in Mexico City, which is our National History Museum. And anyone knows who the guy there is? Madero, Francisco y Madero. You've seen him in 1,000 streets in Mexico. So he opposed Porfirio Diaz, the dictator, in 1910. He eventually got him to hold a real good election. He won good, Madero, President Madero. He was in power for 3 years, and then he was assassinated, along with his vice president. Back then, we had, so this is 1910, the election of 1910. He took office in 1911, and he was killed in 1913. This is all before the 1917 Constitution, right? So if this guy had not been killed with a lot of assistance from the U.S. ambassador, I'm sorry, I have to say, but the U.S. government did not like him. He was too democratic, too free-thinking, too well-educated. He was from Coahuila, again, that I just mentioned. He won the election good and fair, and his theme, his electoral theme was, Effective suffrage, no re-election. Sufragio efectivo, no re-elección. What do we want? We want effective suffrage, no re-election. So much so that when the PRI won eventually and became the National Party, you would see the PRI heading in and then the slogan of the party was effective suffrage, no re-election. They were that bad and that cynic that they would say effective suffrage, even when they were committing the worst of the frauds there had ever been, right? So what I'm trying to tell you with this is, had he remained in power, maybe all this Mexican Revolution bloodbath would not have happened. Maybe we would not have needed the INE. You know, this is a guy who could have created an INE before his time. But, of course, history, that's very Latin American as well. The elected president gets killed. The army took over. This was a general from the army that the U.S. supported and won and recognized as the new president. And then we had almost 20 years of a Mexican Revolution that ended in a constitution in 17, but that killed 1 million people. So that was not a happy affair. So this is an ad that the National Electoral Institute will play. This is right now on Mexican television so that you get an idea of the messages that they're given. This is the Electoral Institute of Mexico. Pay attention, questions are coming. You're bound to be asked something about this, so open your eyes and your ears.
El futuro de México empieza contigo.
I'm sorry, I want you to kind of understand what's happening. Do read these subtitles if you can.
El futuro de México empieza contigo.
Con tu compromiso.
Cuando eliges participar.
Cuando actúas.
Cada voz cuenta.
Cada paso abre camino.
Participar es decir, aquí estoy.
Es defender lo que amamos.
Y hacerlo crecer.
Porque México se construye.
Con tu fuerza.
Con la mía.
Con la de todas y todos.
México no se detiene porque tú tampoco lo haces. Participar es actuar.
El futuro se escribe con tu participación. INE.
Okay, that's an INE ad, National Electoral Institute spot on TV. What messages do you hear? What are they telling you, Mexican, to do?
Our voice matters.
Participate, yes. Get involved. What else? What else beautiful, poetic messages did you find? Involvement, yes. What else? Everyone counts. So can anyone get an IFE card and vote? Yes, anyone, as long as you're 18. Good. Anything about the future? What did they say about the future? The future begins with you and is built by you. We're counting on you. What else could you hear? Mexico is built with everyone's strength. So the message of the INE is beautiful. You know, it's unity, it's participation, we're all in there for it. So it has been working like that very nicely until very recently. We are having our doubts about it now, but it has done an amazing job since 1990 when it was created. Okay, I just kind of wanted you to get an image of it. No, Larry, could you help me with the microphone?
Oh,
We have a complaint over here. Let's hear it.
No complaint. I
Good.
just wanted to know, you said it's not working very well now, INE. What kind of problems is it having? I hadn't heard about any of that.
So we'll discuss this tomorrow, But yeah, it includes defunding and taking away power from it and getting it involved with the judicial election that some of you have asked about. That has put it into a tough position. And the way the board members are elected and chosen now, who are citizens, these are not government officials, that has been manipulated a bit, and we don't like that. So the institute is there, and it's still fully funded, I understand, but that has been changing a little bit. Through what? What would President Sheinbaum use to change that about the INE? What tool would she use to change an electoral reform? Because we love electoral reforms and changing the Constitution. Yes, both are right. Let's take a little bit of the history of the INE, which I think will do you good. Do the subtitles make sense up there, or do you kind of, is that fine? Okay. Because then we have stuff going on down there that I want you to be able to see. Okay.
Iniciemos. Antes de la década de 1990, en México teníamos un sistema electoral deficiente. El mayor de sus defectos era que el gobierno era juez y parte en todo. Era jugador y era árbitro. No olvidemos que el Partido Revolucionario Institucional, el PRI, era una fuerte maquinaria de poder que hacía todo lo posible para no perder bajo ninguna opción. Llevaba años ganando todas las elecciones presidenciales y hasta las legislativas. Y esto lo lograba debido a que como partido participaba en las elecciones, pero como gobierno controlaba a las mismas, registraba a los votantes y determinaba el resultado sin ningún mecanismo de transparencia o neutralidad. Antes de 1990 existía un órgano llamado la Comisión Federal Electoral, en la cual participaban con voz y voto, supuestamente, representantes de los partidos políticos, registrados legalmente. También integraban esta comisión un representante de la Cámara de Diputados y otro de la Cámara de Senadores, un notario público, y era presidida por el secretario de Gobernación. Aquí necesito toda su atención porque este punto es clave. Justamente, quien era presidente de esa Comisión Federal Electoral era el secretario de Gobernación, personaje que, bueno, políticamente representa la mano derecha del presidente en turno. De hecho, es designado por el propio presidente. En pocas palabras, el segundo grado al mando en el poder político nacional. Así que era la Secretaría de Gobernación, órgano de todas las confianzas y que obedece al presidente, la encargada de organizar las elecciones en México. Era del dominio público que en esas épocas el padrón electoral, es decir, la lista en donde están registrados todos los ciudadanos que pueden votar, era un verdadero desastre. Había nombres repetidos en diferentes ciudades del país y hubo escándalos perfectamente documentados que daban constancia que en algunas elecciones había nombres de votantes que llevaban varios años muertos. Hasta los muertos votan por el PRI. Era el chiste que pasaba de boca en boca en esos tiempos. Hubo un intento de crear una credencial para votar, pero esta no tenía fotografía, no tenía candados de protección y era fácilmente falsificable. También se encontraron en el país miles y miles de estas credenciales falsas que permitían, pues, manipular las elecciones en diferentes puntos. Para nadie es desconocido el vergonzoso pasaje de 1988, cuando durante las elecciones del 6 de julio, en plena elección del presidente de la República, el sistema de cómputo de conteo de votos se detuvo. Alrededor de las 8:30 de la noche, todas las computadoras encargadas de proporcionar esa información se apagaron. No había flujo de datos. Las autoridades declararon que el sistema se había caído y durante varias horas no hubo más información del conteo de votos. Ante este silencio, empezó a correr el rumor entre la prensa que el candidato opositor, Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, llevaba la ventaja en las votaciones. El nerviosismo aumentaba y el gobierno no podía dar más explicaciones. En la madrugada del 7 de julio de 1988, el presidente del PRI, Jorge de la Vega Domínguez, hizo públicas las cifras y anunció el triunfo del candidato oficial, Carlos Salinas de Gortari. Por cierto, ¿quién presidía la Comisión Federal Electoral en ese momento y que era el responsable de esa caída del sistema? Así es, el secretario de Gobernación Manuel Bartlett Díaz, actual director de la Comisión Federal de Electricidad. Lo reitero porque es importante. El presidente y su gobierno controlaban a su antojo y sin rendir cuentas a nadie el proceso electoral. La presión por parte de los partidos políticos de oposición, organizaciones de la sociedad civil y la opinión pública lograron que en 1990 se hicieran reformas importantes a la Constitución en materia electoral y se creó el Código Federal de Instituciones y Procedimientos Electorales, el COFIPE, antecedente de la actual Ley General de Instituciones y Procedimientos Electorales.
Okay, we'll stop right there. So you can understand why the 1988 election was so important. Did you see Mr. Bartlett, who was the Interior Secretary, or we used to call it the Secretary of Government? So Claudia Sheinbaum goes to the World Cup inaugural, and she gets shot and dies. So who becomes president? Ever thought of that? No, we did not like that the crazy vice presidential thing the U.S. had. That's one thing we did not buy into. Ever thought of that? What if we lose Claudia Sheinbaum somehow? Who becomes the president? Ever thought? The government secretary, the interior. He, by law, did you hear? He is the second most important political position in the country. He becomes president, and then, as usual, depending on how long the term has been going, he can finish the term or usually just call on Congress to call new elections, okay? So he was so important. Mr. Bartlett is especially, did you hear that thing that during the past administration with President Lopez Obrador, he was the director of the Federal Electricity Commission that you'll all love and know and appreciate so much. He was also the governor of my home state of Puebla. Very corrupt, very bad. Actually, I have a communications degree, bachelor's degree, is that called? There's a big document. Guess who signed that thing? Manuel Bartlett. He's awful. It's almost worthless just because of that. But for my hard work, right? Okay, I just wanted you to see how important it is, this position. So he was, this official was the guy in charge of elections. You know, okay, we'll hold elections. Who do you think is going to win? If I'm from the PRI, my president's from the PRI, my candidate, and all of these things. Remember that was a Federal Electoral Commission. And did you notice the commission was made up of legislators, of he was presided over by the government secretary, and there were a few other officials that kind of overlooked the whole thing. But this was really a pre-operation. They could do whatever they wanted with the ID cards, with the registries, everything. Yes?
So didn't the same trick with the computers happen in one of AMLO's runs for mayor? No? Why did he claim that why was he out there in the Zocalo for so long saying he had won and there was some irregularity?
So she's asking about President Lopez Obrador complaining about electoral fraud in 2006. This was when he wanted to become president. In 2006, he was the mayor. So this is what happens with some of these politicians. When they win, there's no fraud. When they did not win, there is big rigging and big electoral frauds. So the problem here, you've never heard of that, have you? So the 2006 election was won by President Calderon by 4% of the vote. So remember, in Mexico, you win the presidency with 50% of the vote plus 1. Then that's all you need. The more votes you get, you're the president. There's no second, what's that called? A second round of elections. That doesn't exist. Whoever got the most votes from the people, from all those INE cards I'm going to show you in a second, what's the one. So he did not like, was there fraud? His claim more than fraud was that President Calderon, who was in power, influenced the election too much. He meddled too much into the election. This was his first attempt to become president. Then he ran again in 2012. President Peña Nieto won by 49% or so. So López Obrador lost by, 12 points or so. So he could not complain that. And then in 2018, he won by a large majority, like 51%, and that was all good. But the important thing here is the system was working fine. From 1996, 1987 on, including all those elections. But then people don't like it when they lose by half a percentage point or 2 percentage points. So maybe he was right that Calderon meddled a bit, because actually when he won in 2018, President Peña Nieto, who was in power, was thanked by the president-elect López Obrador for not meddling in this election. I thank the pre-president, Peña Nieto, for not meddling in this election, almost saying, this is why I won, because now the president didn't meddle. So meddling is always, because presidents by law cannot be involved in elections. They cannot be re-elected, but they cannot participate in the election. You cannot have a sitting president going out, giving a nice speech for his or her candidate. That's not allowed by the law. This is something the candidates have to do on their own. So yes, he did complain that, but again, this is not a system failure, but more of a minimum margin thing. Okay. Where were we? We created, let me show you another video, because it's really important you kind of understand where the INE actually came from. We might skip the video because it's pretty much the same. It was created. The big important thing on the IFE, at this time it was created as the Federal Electoral Institute. That, again, the deputies and the government secretary and all the public officials that used to regulate or look over the Electoral Commission were removed, and citizens were put in their place. Who would choose the citizens? The political parties and the legislatures. And they would not be put on a vote, they would be appointed, but a requirement was that they were not sitting officials or cabinet members or anything like that. So there was, as opposed to a commission that kind of represented the people in the elections, this was an institute. Remember, institution is really important. This was a new institute funded by the government, led by, I think it was about 18 board members then, with a chairman that would oversee the whole electoral process. So this is really important. Can anyone see good enough to read that out loud for me? Can anyone see it perfect? Who's close enough?
Okay, the IFE shall be the authority on electoral matters, professional in its performance, and autonomous in its decisions. Its actions shall be governed by the principles of certainty, legality, impartiality, objectivity, and professionalism.
Amazing, thanks. That is what the law says. So the IFE became the ultimate organizing authority of the elections. We'll move in a second to decide who is the ultimate authority on who won the election. But who gets to organize the elections, who manages the money given by the government to set up the ballot boxes, the security procedures, to register Mexicans and all that, it is the IFE with its board members using a lot of money to do all this, and creating the institute, even the facilities, the buildings and everything that was needed started in 1990, and this is what brought us closer to clear more fair elections. So that is, I just kind of wanted you to see what. Oh, good question. The IFE, this started as the Federal Electoral Institute, but then with President Peña Nieto, when I was there in 2014, they decided to turn it into the National Electoral Institute. Remember yesterday when we talked we made a parallel? We don't make comparisons here in Connect with Mexico. We make parallels between the US and Mexico. So in the US, you had every state deciding on how elections are held, where the ballot boxes are going to be, where the districts are, and that is more of a federal system. Remember, this was the Federal Electoral Institute. We are more of a centrist democracy. We like Mexico City to take care of many more things, which can be good and not always. So President Peña Nieto introduced a reform that would create the National Electoral Institute so that Mexico City would take charge, the National Electoral Institute would be charged with holding all elections everywhere, federal or local. But 32 local electoral institutes would be created, funded, and strengthened to work with the IFE in Mexico City to hold gubernatorial elections. So we have the IFE and 32 local electoral institutes, also publicly funded by the federal government. So he wanted to, why was this done? So that we did not have what the US has. So when is the election for governor in Tabasco on? 2012. Oh, but we have a federal election in 2013. So it's a mismatch of calendars even. So the National Electoral Institute would say, we're going to move your local election for governor 1 year up so that it corresponds to the federal election, and then we all have to pay less for that election because it will come along with the federal. So there were governors who were extended in there. This was very, it's a scandal. Some governors got 2 additional years, and some other governors got 2 fewer years, but they could be candidates again. So, organizing these calendars, so it's been very efficient because now we have the presidential election, the midterms, and mostly every other local or no local election will be held on those years separated by 3 years. It's very money saving. And then again, the districting and everything are decided by Congress and the Federal Electoral Institute, whether Aguascalientes or Tabasco or whoever likes it or not. This is not a local decision where the districts are. I was asked yesterday how many electoral districts there are in Mexico. How many representatives do we have in Congress? How many deputies? 300. We have 300 electoral districts. How come we have 500 deputies in the Chamber of Deputies? Yeah, but this is just the Chamber deputies. So I'm making these tricky questions I love. We have 300 electoral districts, but we have 500 deputies actually in the Chamber of Deputies in Mexico. What's going on? Where are these 200 people coming from? Proportional representation, yes. So we have, each district has its deputy, and then each political party, depending on how much votes each party gets an allotted, an appointed deputy in Congress with no votes. The President Peña Nieto, when I was there, and President Sheinbaum, I have to say, both have tried to reduce that number back to 300, to eliminate proportional representation. Guess what? The legislators don't like that idea, have never liked it. So much so that the Senate, you were right, the Senate, how does the Senate work in the US? How many senators per state? How about Mexico? You almost Mexicans out there, how many senators does your district have, does your state have? 4. We doubled that because we need more politicians and bureaucrats out there. We have plenty of money for them. So that's what changes. It's also equal representation on the Senate, but we have 4 instead of 2. We've added to that. Okay, identification. This is really important. Chavos técnicos allá atrás, ¿trajeron sus INEs? ¿La tienen? ¿Me la pueden prestar para pasarla al público? Y no hay bronca. Si no quieren, no, ¿eh? So I have 2, well, I'm speaking in Spanish there. There you go. We have another one here. Pass it around. I want you to see what a INE election card is, and my two tech victims there who helped me out with this are also going to... Y te traes una para acá, Marcos, y una, como en salón de clases, por favor. ¿Sabes qué? Yo creo que de este lado. Muchas gracias. Se las devuelvo, ¿eh? I'll give it back. Maybe. So, take a look at that. See the details. You're going to learn about it in this video, but I want you to have the evidence in your hands. Those of you who have been in juries know what I'm saying. No, it has much better stuff now. That's ancient technology. That's ancient technology. So, identification. Remember in the video we just saw how they pre-created these ID cards like they were mementos, you know? They had no photographs. They had no signature. They just had a name. So people, you know, I come over here. I'm not registered. Doesn't matter. Just come over and vote for the pre, and that'll do it. And we might even give you a little money or something. So this part was really important for Mexican democracy. Let me give you this.
Hola, soy tu credencial para votar. Soy un documento indispensable para que puedas ejercer tu derecho al voto, ya sea en territorio nacional o desde el extranjero. Además, soy la mejor identificación, ya que cuento con los más altos estándares de seguridad, por lo que soy prácticamente infalsificable e inalterable. Para que me conozcas mejor, te comento que tu fotografía estará sellada con un holograma que cambia de color al moverla, y tengo un logotipo del INE con textura. Además, tengo una foto fantasma construida con toda tu información y un microtexto en la parte inferior de la zona gris donde colocas tu firma y en el recuadro donde colocan la marca cuando votas. También cuento con impresión de líneas con 2 o más colores. Y tengo 2 códigos QR que contienen tu información codificada y un tercero que te permite entrar a la página electrónica del INE. Sin olvidar que contengo elementos ópticamente variables que cambian de color, como es el mapa de la República Mexicana, que se conforma con los nombres de todos los estados del país. Y no olvidemos que tengo tu nombre completo, fecha de nacimiento, dirección, clave de elector, CURP, año de registro, sexo, tus datos geográficos como estado, municipio y sección electoral, la fecha de emisión y la de pérdida de vigencia, así como tu huella y firma. Todo esto me hace ser el documento más útil a las y los mexicanos para identificarse y votar. Así que no olvides cuidarme, actualizarme cuando cambies de domicilio y renovarme cuando esté por concluir 10 años de vigencia. Porque tu credencial para votar es gratuita, fácil de obtener y representa tu garantía para votar e identificarte.
Okay, how impressive was that? What jumped at you at this security ID card? What element seemed high-tech and very important to you? Yes.
I am shocked how much information that card carries. Wow. Wow.
She's shocked about the amount of information. Are you shocked nicely, or are you terrified that so much stuff is in there? It goes both ways. Right now, I think you can ask not to have your address, your actual address printed. You can also, if you're not male or female, but non-binary or something, you can also identify it. It doesn't change anything else on your Mexican documentation, but it does appear there as ID. What else did you see that was really high-tech? Let's look at the Mexican, your fingertip, your fingerprint there. We have changed that a lot for QRs, right? When I told you a second ago, you go to the bank, I want a bank account, who are you? I'm this. They use the QR, they talk to the IFE and said, is this guy the one who said, yes. Is this his fingerprint? And then the bank has a thing, and then the IFE says, yes, this is the guy we thought he was. Did you see the Mexican map, the map of Mexico that's right there? What's in there printed? The names of the states. How about your picture? What's painted there? How is your picture? Well, there's your photograph, and there's like, what is it? A ghost image. What's there making your last name, your name, all your data is making that up. And the QR cards, and then there's a little spot where the federal and local elections, depending on your districts, because your district is found there. You know where to vote because it says there. A given number in your state, that's where you go to vote. And when you're going to vote, you look for that number in the listing that is published on newspapers and on the IFE website to know where your voting booth actually is physically, right? So, and then when you go, they will mark your card to know that to make it unusable for that election again, they will print your thumb with ink so that you cannot vote again. Not voting again is so important. So just to finish this part, let's go to this. I'll try to make this. This is an INA table. I had the courtesy of moving everything to English so we can understand it. So these elements ensure that citizens can freely exercise the right to vote in the 2019 elections. This is even old, in the Puebla election. So they are constantly telling you what should be done. So the voter registry is so important. There is a list of these with your picture every time you go to vote. They will check your ID with this book that has all these registries. Very important. The voter ID card with security features. Polling station officials selected by lottery. So who is in the polling station? Citizens. Citizens who are members of this electoral list. So you'll be sent a card and say, we want you to be the president of this voting station on this election. Can you, will you? They are usually selected by your last name, first letter. So Navarro, in this election, everyone is going to be an N something. So we will choose electors from the N group, and you'll be president or secretary or voting. There's this president, secretary, and a couple of, what's that called? To vote, to count the votes and register them rightly, right? Confirm that the votes are there. Indelible liquid, that's what they use to paint your thumb. And then they even give you a very special, high-proof, high-quality marker to actually use on the paper ballot. We are now only moving on electronic voting. We've had such experiences. Now you know that we're so bad with computers that we have refused to do electronic voting for a very long time. So that's not happening yet, but it has been talked about. So, ballots printed on security paper. Ballots are just as high security. You know, the army is the Mexican Mint prints this paper ballots. They have high security, just like the ID card that you just saw. The army sends out troops to give them to each ballot voting place president. He will get in his home from a soldier, and he will keep them, and he has to destroy them. All of the ballots that were not used during the election must be destroyed or marked out and then returned like that. That's part of the thing. The voting booth actually also arrives at the president of the voting station. The INE will provide the table, the cover-ups, the markers, everything is there for you to take to the place where the voting will take place. And the political parties can, of course, have their representatives in each of the voting stations. You identify yourself as a member of the party, you register for that voting station, and you go to oversee the election. And then we even have foreign observers, which was a big deal because sovereignty might be stepped on, right? But now the OAS and other countries, anyone, the European Union sends a lot of observers to our elections, and they do a very good job. And anyone else who's an expert, an academic, or a political scientist can be there. So I am giving you this because, well, let me leave you with that for a second. So this is not here, but I was talking yesterday about the transparent boxes, which were really so important, because in the pre-times, the election, the ballot box came from the government secretariat already filled. You know, half of the box was filled with pre-votes. And then you would come to your darkened box, and then when it was open, there were more votes than electors on the listing, right? So all of these things come at a cost, but these are the tiny little things, one by one, that the electoral reforms we talked about actually did to provide a safe and secure and good vote.
I just wanted to make a comment about how rare it is in the world to find a peaceful transition from autocracy to democracy, such as has happened in Mexico.
It is, he's saying how hard it is to move from autocracy to democracy. Like I said yesterday, this took 30 years, step by step. You know, I have never been a PAN member, a National Action Party member, but I was once invited to be an observer of the party in Puebla. And I could see all of this. You know, this was before, after the 88 fraud, but before the actual final IFE was set in place. So it was so important that you were the observer, so these observers from political parties and foreign observers have a right to be given a copy of the results on a piece of paper signed by the president and the secretary for them to take to their political parties. So when the election is done any year, the secretary closes the voting station, the secretary sets out the results, and then there's this, yes, same time, Thursday, not tomorrow, but Thursday, yes? So the president is given this big plastic sheet that he will hang outside of the site. What's the usual voting site in the US? Where do you go to vote usually? Schools? Churches? Same here. It's usually churches, even convents. I've gone to convents, which is a big thing to vote. Schools a lot, and maybe civil organizations like the Rotary Club or something like that, that's open, that anyone can go in, and that they will get, the IFE will get permission to open it there.
Are there primaries here? And do you have to be registered with a party to have an INE card?
No, you don't have to be registered. Yes, primaries are a very common, a very recent thing, but is not by law. So if the party wants to have it, now in Morena, for example, the ruling party, they are having polls. So they are conducting polls with members to see who is going to be elected, even though everyone pretty much knows who's going to be elected. So yes, but no. And the law has nothing to do with that. The party is free to choose the electors the way they want. But it does open up the democratic plate. But the INE and the government says this is not for us to demand on parties, so that you can do it or not. If a party just decides that whoever is going to be because the president of the party said, that's fine, as long as he's registered eventually before the INE, right? Okay, we're almost done. Someone brought up the thing about cost, because I'm emphasizing these security measures and these ID card and all that. And you know, this comes at a cost, but that IFE card that you saw, have we given them back? Did you guys get your IFE cards back? What happened to them? Oh. Are they out here somewhere? Okay. Okay, I'll ask for it. Ya regresaron. Oh, I have one. Do I owe one? Oh, before we forget. Thank you, guys. Gracias, chavos. So that INE card that Mexicans hold, that we all hold, are actually our national identification cards. If you don't want to vote, but you want to use it just to use it as ID, that'll be fine. It's so expensive and so well done that it works not just for voting, but for actually. Remember, I kind of remember living in the US many years ago for a year and seeing voting, and there it was so easy. It was like, oh, this is my neighbor. He owns the shop back there. Of course he's going to vote. And then there was no registration and all of this comes at a cost. So the Morena party has come up with this. How much does it cost to vote? So they made this table. This is Mexico in 2012. Cost per voter, cost per campaign, and number of voters every nation. So there's Mexico, $25 every vote. Every piece of paper that every Mexican puts in that ballot box comes at a $25. This is US dollars per person. Brazil, $12.73. The US, $11.67. France, $1.88. And Russia, of course, 44 cents. And then cost per campaign, that cost per campaign includes, see how expensive it is in Mexico and in Brazil, because both countries have public funding for campaigns for political parties. This is not just how expensive it is to hold the elections, but actually all the money that's given to campaigns to campaign on, because they cannot take private money, okay? And then the number of voters. It is more expensive or less expensive depending on how many people are served. We have about, in 2012, we have 76 million voters. We have about 88 now for a population of 128, so that's good adults that can vote. Yes?
I think in the United States, the actual cost is probably well over $75 to $100 because of all the PAC money and money's going in to run the campaign.
Right. When you include private money and corporations, excuse me, yes, this is all public funding that goes into the campaigns, and especially in Mexico where the ID card, but also the campaigning. Larry, can you help me over there? And then we only have 76 million voters, 150 in Brazil, and about 227 in the US. I guess that sounds right for 330 million people, right? So what I want to say is the Mexican government is and has been spending a lot of money. Yes?
Yeah, because I just want to add that I just saw that Elon Musk got a $1.2 billion government contract, and 2 days later, he agrees to spend $550 million for the Republican races. Yes. So the true cost is very hidden, yes, and very hidden. That's one antidote.
That's the beauty of politics, you see. and talking about Elon Musk, I would ask you who the director of NASA is now. Mr. Isaacson, is this his name? A buddy of Elon Musk. So it's everywhere. When Elon Musk and Donald Trump had their little fight, their middle school fight, Isaacson was just about to be confirmed as NASA director, and Donald Trump said, oh no, that's not going to happen. Then they were friends again, and then they immediately confirmed him in the Senate. So money was flowing as well. I know that was controversial. Mexico did discuss whether private money should come into the elections or not. It was part of an electoral reform discussion in 2014, and the Congress decided that it was not a good idea, that there was enough public funding, even though it's a lot of tax money. This is what it is that would go into elections. But we have actually made it very safe or very secure in the items that we use, even though these did not include the narco money we were talking about yesterday. Because is there narco money flowing into political campaigns? A lot of them. This is a bit of a can of worms, but I wonder if you've heard about Sinaloa and the governor of Sinaloa recently. So what's different between governor of Sinaloa now and a kingpin out there in Sinaloa or Michoacan or Baja California? How are they different? How were they different in the view of the U.S. before, in contrast to now, the Department of Justice of the Trump administration? Can you see? So what happened was that the governor was requested by the Department of Justice in the U.S. as a narco dealer, pretty much, that he's campaigning, because they seem to have a lot of evidence. Where did this evidence against the Sinaloa governor come from, do you think, in the U.S.? We're not that good. No, not the CIA, just said cartel members that snitched, that spilled the beans. How did this happen? Where did they? So they could get like protection and hide themselves in the United States. Get protection and hide themselves in the United States? Where did this happen? Where did this spilling of the beans happen? Where? Here? So CIA is only outside of the United States. These are people who Mexico extradited to the U.S. because the U.S. is pressuring, you're not doing anything. So, okay, do you know how many criminals or alleged drug dealers or drug kingpins Mexico extradited in the last 12 months? President Sheinbaum. A bunch, like 80-something. A lot of people have been sent there. So what happens, they say, I want protection. This protection from the U.S. prosecutor, where you say, I'm going to say this and that, I'm going to give you information, and then I'll reduce your sentence, right? That's what happens. We'll negotiate with the prosecutor. That does not exist in Mexico. If it did, maybe we would have more court proceedings of kingpins. But this negotiated thing, again, let's go back to yesterday and the common law and civil law thing. Civil law doesn't even consider that negotiating, while common law from the UK and now in the US says, sure, we'll negotiate. You give me information. It's very capitalistic, right? You give me something, I'll give you something back. So the allegations that these kingpins that have been extradited to the United States was that the governor of Sinaloa was not only elected with drug money, but he was part of the operation of growing, transiting, or whatever that's called, moving drugs into the United States, and he was an active part. So that was how long ago? Have you been reading your Mexico City newspapers? Watching the evening newscast for Mexico City? Say nothing else.
I thought it was gasoline that he was buying from Texas and moving it. Oh. Yeah. I mean, that's what the paper said.
She's saying that this was a stolen gasoline case. You need to be very careful with all these growing number of political corruption things, because this is another case. This is another former governor from Baja California, not Sinaloa, and he was from the PAN, National Action Party. So the analysts think that this is payback that Sheinbaum is using to distract from the Sinaloa governor. Now they arrested the former governor of Baja California, who is a historical figure. How long ago was he the governor? So this other governor from Sinaloa was a sitting governor. He was right there in the state government palace. How long ago was this governor from Baja California a governor, do you think? 40 years. In 1989, just about, he was elected. He was the first governor ever, not of the PRI, to be elected for a state office. And now he's in jail because, is this true or not? We really don't know. But yeah, this is part of the political game. So coming back to Sinaloa, the Sinaloa governor was sitting there. The DOJ comes up and says, not in state, but Foreign Relations Secretariat, our Foreign Relations Office, receives a notice from the FBI and the Justice Department saying, we want this alleged criminal in the U.S. Who else suffered that fate? So there's this tiny DOJ office in the Southern District of Manhattan who sends out these extradition requests to governments. And they're doing this with our sitting governor of Sinaloa, and there's a scandal in Mexico. One difference is that this was usually happening with who was asked to be extradited before this happened. Who was usually the suspect? Cartel kingpins, leaders, yeah. And Mexico would say, okay, well, we'll send a few and then we'll recruit some over here. This is really different because this is a sitting government official. This is a governor, and the DOJ dares to request him. Who else went through that passage recently? El Bencho, but this is a kingpin. Who else in political office suffered that path in Latin America? What's his name? Maduro. This is exactly what happened to Maduro. The district in Manhattan requests him to present himself there because he has these charges before U.S. law. The U.S. Army comes and takes him there to present himself because he wouldn't go. Of course he wouldn't go. So the question in Mexico is, will the Marines come to pick up Governor Moya and take him over there? What do you think? If you were the U.S. Navy Secretary, would you dispatch these people? If you were Donald Trump? That's a tricky question. Yes, yes. What I want you to see is that the big difference now is that this had never happened in Mexico. We have never had a sitting governor, however guilty he might seem, and I'm not saying he did anything wrong, but however, the U.S. had never meddled to such an extent. Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm just really curious, like Sinaloa, is it actually so very different? You know, like it has the U.S. has security heightened on it, and just how unique is Sinaloa for the corruption, the crime, just the situation, and how is Sinaloa?
It's not very unique. So, you know, well, I'll just briefly say we have the Sinaloa cartel, and what other cartel? They're fighting each other. So Sinaloa is nothing compared to this beautiful state we're sitting in. The big cartel operations and organization all started in Guadalajara in just a few months. Haven't you seen Narcos on Netflix? This is where you get your information. So no, Sinaloa is actually a competition cartel for the Jalisco cartel. Ever wonder why this is called the New Generation Jalisco cartel? Because these are the sons and nephews of the original Jalisco cartel members who have been here from the 60s. And they have made, half of Guadalajara was built with a little bit of that money as well. And then Sinaloa came up and Juarez came up, and the Mexican government, before we actually started fighting them, would manage them. They would say, you stay in Sinaloa, you stay here in Jalisco, but here, and then you, Juarez, don't move over here because I don't want any fights. Just take your routes, take your turfs, and then we'll go from there. But Sinaloa is a very big agricultural state as well, not just of marijuana, but of everything, right? So it is a big state. It is not unique. It is just that they became very powerful, and they have been trying to extend them. So the problem is Sinaloa cartel extends to Durango, to Zacatecas, to Tamaulipas, and then Jalisco cartel wants to do the same. Tamaulipas as well. So this is my territory. I'm going to fight you there. So you're like, why are people killing each other in Tamaulipas next to the Texas border? Because they're from different cartels. And then cartels have armed wings. Ever heard of those? There are whole sections of the cartels that are the ones who carry the guns. They're pretty much the cartel military. And then these gunmen say, I'm really powerful. I'm holding the guns. Why am I responding to this kingpin? I'm going to make my own cartel. You know, this is business enterprises. This is a whole multinational business. But good question, yeah. Sinaloa is not unique, but it is a lot in the way, and the governor happens to be there working with them. The risky, dangerous question would be, is the governor of Jalisco doing such a thing, would you think? I don't think so, really. I think different things are happening, but not that, so.
I was told, actually yesterday, by another gringo, that there's two people that had disappeared that were Canadian that have been associated with the Sinaloa cartel up in Canada.
Right.
And
British
then
Columbia,
there's
yes.
a third person, I don't know his name, Robert, I don't know his full name, and he was also possibly maybe associated.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, I know this is off topic for what we're doing, why would one
It is, yes, but okay.
disappear, are they part of the cartel? And I just don't know where to go with that. How does that work?
So she's asking pretty much about foreigners, Canadians, Americans who are involved with the cartels and how Mexico kind of treats them or the cartels, right? Because, you know, I will respond to you saying, how does a lot of the drug that crosses the border from Mexico into the United States get there? Are these drones and submarines and a whole flotilla that drug traffickers have to get the drugs into the U.S.? Because the whole business is getting the drugs into the U.S. How do you guess about half of these kilos of drugs actually get into the U.S.? Who crosses the border with them? You beautiful people, you are the mules. The cartels will hire you for little money, and this happens all over the world, not just Americans or Canadians, but everywhere. You pick up a bag, you have a U.S. passport, a U.S. driver's license, the border guard oh, hey, gringo, welcome back. Go right through. And then in your trunk, you have a bunch of that a Mexican will not as easily do, right? I know they do, but so a lot of this traffic goes on with U.S. citizens' knowledge and participation. Does that make you all drug dealers? I don't think so. I think the Canadian guy I think you're talking about really did have a branch in British Columbia. So these are, when I talk about drug cartels, it's important that you see, these are multinational organizations. Cartel leaders have always said, we have a business to run, and if we have to pull out our guns to do it, we will. But we would rather not. We would rather you let us do our business, get this crossing of drugs, because there is demand over there. Remember what I said yesterday? One of you ladies came up to me the last time and said, I never heard of this being a demand problem. There is a demand problem, because the day Americans and Canadians and Europeans stop drugging themselves, there will be no business for this cartel. Extortion will always be here still, but well, that's another topic, right? But yeah, so yes, and what I will add to the question, which is really interesting, is we are very good at extraditing foreigners. You know, I live in Puerto Vallarta. Suddenly, California says, oh, we have a runaway thief or a runaway drug dealer or something that we know is in Puerto Vallarta. The Puerto Vallarta Municipal Police will find him in 6 hours. Will take him to the consulate, and it will flown to the U.S. I wish they would find Mexican criminals as fast. But state police, municipal police, they will find that American once we know that he's there in a second. We're very good at that in that way of law enforcement. So we usually just extradite them. And this is one of the complaints that President Sheinbaum has. When she's asked by the U.S. government to extradite a governor, she's like, we have 900 requests of extradition in the U.S. for Mexicans and Americans who have committed crimes in Mexico, and they never give them back. They're over there. But I don't even think the processes are continuing. You know, our foreign secretary is actually doing that. But this was one of her complaints. And she's getting in a lot of trouble because she does not want to give up the governor. I was talking about this with some of you yesterday. What is the first step to let you know you're in trouble? You're a governor, you're a public official. What's the first step to let you know you're in trouble with the U.S. government? They remove your visa. They cancel your visa. This has been happening a lot. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But we have the governor of Baja California, she's a lady, the governor of Tamaulipas, both border states, whose visa has been canceled. So the U.S. Department, you know, there's this letter that the Secretary of State signs and says, I personally don't believe he should have a visa. And boom, it's canceled. That's it. And that is a sign that something harder or tougher might come after that. Of course, the Sinaloa governor, Moya, his visa was canceled and removed before he was actually asked to be brought to justice in the U.S. So look into that when you read the Mexican newspapers, because if there's a public official who has no visa anymore, the U.S. is losing all the shopping he was going to do in San Antonio or Los Angeles.
You've talked a lot about what's gone from Mexico up to the U.S. What about those of us that work in Mezcala or San Pedro de Chicana and we see Sur 13, SUR 13 all over the place, and some of the kids don't want to continue on to school, they prefer to sell drugs. Can you talk about the influence of Sur 13, where it came from, the effect of it here in Mexico on youth throughout Mexico?
Yes, Sur 13, but you're actually talking about these smaller cartels that tend to spring up locally. They are not national cartels. They're all the multinational corporations that we have. I would ask you, why do you think they come up? What brings up this creation of smaller cartels, do you think? Colombia is very good at that.
I think the lack of jobs for these children, these young men, they have no places to go. They're desperate. It's the same thing happens in the States. These kids are selling drugs because there are no jobs, decent jobs.
That's a good reason. They don't have jobs, they don't have opportunities. Remember that this goes down to, when we look at politics and law enforcement, this comes down to this policy of beheading the kingpin or the leader. So US policy, anti-drug policy is will eliminate the leader of the cartel, the kingpin. We'll get him extradited, and then we'll take care of things. How did that go? That is exactly the same policy that the US government is using now in Iran. They thought that killing the Ayatollah and bombing the whole thing was the end of the war. Guess what? The thing is still there. So when US policy, along with Mexico, is implemented and the kingpins are killed, what happens is that the nephew and the husband and the cousin start taking up these drug trafficking duties, and these smaller cartels grow. So I'm pretty sure that this smaller organization, it might have been influenced by Central America a bit. It is the result of these big cartels being beheaded, and then someone has to take control. Right, from the north to the... But are these American citizens, do you think, that, or are these deported Mexicans who are here? I don't know. I think so.
I'm asking you. I just see it written all over in the small towns, SUR 13, and that
Yeah,
says,
like graffiti, yes.
Graffiti, we have control here.
It is a big thing. And then MS-13 is likely to fight the Jalisco cartel or the Sinaloa cartel, eventually, most likely the Jalisco cartel, because there's a turf to be taken care of. So what I'm trying to say is this policy will never work because you get rid of the kingpin, but then there are younger, more violent, less prepared people who are fighting. Why are we so violently? Again, you know, back in the 70s and 80s, the kingpin said, we have the guns. If you send out the army against us, we will fight them. But we rather negotiate with you the routes and take the product out to market, which is what the PRI did. Not very perfectly, but the PRI said, okay, I don't want this bloodbath in the country. You go here, you go there. And then Calderon, from the National Arc Party, Felipe Calderon came, and because he won with half a percentage point or 2 percentage points, remember I just told him, he won with such small margin and he was getting such a problem of legitimacy that he decided on the second week of his administration that fighting the cartels with the army was a good idea to gain legitimacy and to give people something else to think about. So he launched in his Michoacan, his home state of Michoacan, 1,200 troops, and that was in 2006. And 20 years later, we're still doing the same thing, and the drugs are there. The avocados can be sent, the limes can be picked, because this violence thing is just never ending. I'm not saying there's an easy solution. Maybe we should negotiate or just legalize or something. A lot of people say we can legalize stuff. Many people don't like that. But yes, a lot of the violence does come because of that. These are businesses that want to continue. And when US policy gets even stronger at the border, then we have people not being able to cross to do this marketing thing with drugs. And we get a lot of people from Haiti and Cuba and deported Mexicans that Mexico has to take care of somehow. The jobs are not here really for them, but there's a lot of people stranded here in Mexico that were planning on asking for asylum, and that is not happening, right? So how did we get to this from voting booths? I don't know, but it is always good. What I do want you to know is that we will have a midterm election in July of 2027. It's bound to be very well done and reliable. The one thing that President Sheinbaum wants to do is not defund, but reduce the funding of the INE, because if you remember that chart we had there, what she wants is these $20 or this $25, she wants them down by half. He says, we cannot spend so much money on this election thing. And Mexicans raise their eyebrows and it's like, it's a lot of money, but we have been building this because we are bound to do fraud if all these security things are not there. So that's not very well liked. The removing the 200 deputies, we can do without. But all these security things, she's like, this is costing too much. And tomorrow, Thursday, when I talk about independent agencies, you will see her deal is we cannot spend so much on people giving government papers to people, officials spending that. And we're like, it is expensive, but we need that for transparency, for checks and balances and all that. Remember when she read the law about the INE, I highlighted the autonomous part. This will be an autonomous institute. Remember the UNAM, you know what UNAM is, the university, the National University of Mexico. UNAM stands for United Autonomous University of Mexico. Why is that? Why is the university autonomous? Remember 1968?
Yeah.
The university became autonomous after the 1968 massacre because the rector, the president of the UNAM, wanted to know that his students would be killed, at least on campus, right? So I was explaining to Didi last night, if a Mexico City police officer want to go into UNAM territory, you know, University City in Mexico City, they have to ask permission to the university to actually enter the grounds, the campus. This is, and autonomous is really important because this is what those students were also demanding for. We like the word autonomous, which is pretty much independent, because all of these agencies that I'll talk about tomorrow that we have been losing were autonomous institutions. Just like UNAM. UNAM is a federal huge university. They have hundreds of thousands of students, is the biggest university in Latin America, and it's actually very good, and it costs a lot of money, just like the INE. So this is an independent agency funded by the government. And that is what has taken us years to do, like the INE and all that. You'll learn about more on Thursday. But this is money well spent, we believe. We'll see if you agree. Non-time for questions or anything, right? I see Didi looking at me strangely.
Are you ready?
Yes. Thank you, guys. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you for your questions.